Well, we're grateful to be in week 3 of Uncommon Ground, and so grateful to have Pastor David with us in another conversation where we can hear more of his heart right after he teaches, so that groups and group leaders can get a real feel for where is this coming from even after the gathering ends. And so David, thanks for sitting down with us again. Glad you made it through that teaching. I know that was
got water, so I'm ready to go now.
Not easy. I know that was not easy. There are all these real moments happening. I think that's the beauty of it,
Exactly.
is it's honest moments.
Exactly.
But I want to go back to an honest moment and ask this. This is going to seem interesting to lead out with this, but y'all did not start here in PA. You guys moved to PA from Texas. That had to be uncomfortable in some ways. What was it like? What did you notice? What were the challenging things when y'all first came to visit PA from Texas? Wow, this is different. What was that like for you guys?
So I would say it's interesting, Dave, because you came from the South as well. So
yeah, we were in Kentucky before here. Yeah.
So cultural differences. One of the real simple ones was no Mexican food. We love Mexican food, or Tex-Mex in Texas. So that was one of the things, but that wasn't necessarily a relationship thing.
Yeah.
The other thing we noticed is what oftentimes is termed the difference between cold weather personalities and warm weather personalities. And so in Texas, you say hello to everybody, whether you want to or not, whether you like them or not, you say hello. You just constantly greet, whereas here, people tend to be more reluctant to do that. And so Ruth would even joke when she went to a grocery store here, and at one of the first weeks here, somebody bumped into her in her cart and just kind of growled at her as they walked on by. She said in Texas, somebody had been hugging her and saying, "Oh, bless your heart, are you okay?" And just kind of carrying over her. And so it's just different cultures that way. So.
But the reason why I lead out with that is really because I'm thinking of, as you've been talking and we've been in this series, familiarity is comfort. It's this comforting thing. And so somebody who opposes the way that I think, or is on the other side of that, especially if it's tense, it's unfamiliar, it's uncomfortable. And so I'm immediately have this aversion to it. And so you and Jason both use this term echo chambers, about this almost like a feedback loop of the same kind of message going on and on in my mind. How do you see the echo chambers of just hearing the same thing, staying in the same lane? How do you see that maybe standing in the way of the progress that we're talking about trying to make in Uncommon Ground?
So, I'll give you an example of where it plays out in a real simple way, and that's watching football. When we first moved here, then people would invite us over to watch the Cowboys play the Eagles. I think I did that one time, and that was it. And so that would be the ultimate echo chamber from a sports standpoint, where I want to watch the game with people that are going to cheer for the same things that I'm going to cheer for, and be upset with the same plays that I'm upset with, and that I can just go ahead and be myself. And so I think one of the reasons why we tend to stick with our echo chambers is it's just more comfortable. Like you said, we're familiar with it. And I can say what I want to say, and I don't worry that I'm going to offend. I don't even have to worry about how I say it. I can just go ahead and let it out and just be real blunt. Whereas when I'm in a group different than that, I've got to guard my words. I'm not sure how you're going to respond. I don't know if you're going to like what I say. I may not like what you say. And so it just adds a whole level of tension there that's just very different.
I so appreciate you putting it that way, because I put myself in a room where I'm like, when the other team, when they're cheering for their team, I'm sitting there stewing, or I'm wondering, are they going to be mad at me if I even clap or whatever? So it does remind us of that. But here's why I think that's so important to talk about echo chambers, is because in this teaching especially, I mean, Jason did last week and you did the first week, but in this one especially, it was very clear that we have to get in the game if we want anything to change. And you read from Peter and from Paul, both saying things about blessing my opponent, essentially. We're talking in sports language, if we can keep that metaphor going. How crazy and counterintuitive it would be if the coach goes in the locker room at halftime and says, "Okay, guys, here's our game plan. And by the way, we need to pray for our opposition." Like, that would never happen. And would never, even the most devout follower of Jesus probably wouldn't bring that into the locker room. We trust Jesus, we're following him. And here's what I want to ask you. How often are we just assuming he's going to work it out? You know, that sense of like, I'm going to pray over this, pray about this thing. You're talking about not knowing what to do in our nation, and we're just hoping God works that out. Respond to that. Think through that with me.
So I even think, Dave, when we pray that way, often that's what I'm praying is the way God's going to work it out is he's going to change their hearts and make them like me and make them think like me. And so my prayers are very me-focused with that. And that particular passage about praying that God would bless our enemies, I mean, we've been working on this study for a while, and I've been thinking about what it means to love others. That verse did not pop up until maybe 2 days ago, specifically even for me in this study. And so that was so convicting for me to go, I can't even think of the last time I prayed for somebody that's opposing me to be blessed by God. And that's so foreign to me, and I think foreign to all of us. And so the challenge that way. But then the last verse that we read, I think it was the one in Galatians where, or it might have been Peter, where he says, if we will pray to bless others, then God will bless you. And so it's almost like, as I pray for you, if you happen to be my opposition, then by praying for those blessings on you, it opens the door for God still to bless me as well too. And so, not that we do it just to get something back,
Right.
but my initial response is, why would I pray to bless you? I'm the one that needs the blessing.
Right.
But if I want to be blessed, I've got to pray for your blessings. So,
Right, but that's what's so powerful is that you kept pointing to these verses and these words that are like, get in the game. This is how you do it. Don't wait and sit back, and don't hope that they come to your side.
Yeah.
But Peter even saying, don't retaliate with insults when people insult you. Instead, pay them back with a blessing. As though like he's changing the economy. And Jesus, we know, did. He changed the economy of what real goodness is going to look like. Even when they're our enemies, Christ died for us.
And Dave, it's almost like he wrote those words knowing social media was going to be around, because it is so easy when we get online to just rip each other back and forth. In part because when you're not in the same room together, when you're not face to face, it's easy to say stuff and inflame and talk in ways that we would never talk face to face. And so I think it's important to get in the game. But again, that face to face encounter is what's so big about it.
And that's what I want to spend the last bit of our time together on is, I mean, you talked about blessing those who persecute you, coming straight from Jesus's words through Peter or Paul, and then carrying their burdens, what it's like to get up under somebody else's burden and understand them. And then we do the interview with Pastor Bill and Chief King. I want to ask you, because you got to interview them actually on stage here during a staff opportunity months ago, but then sitting and listening to them talk in that story arc that we got to hear. What is it like to hear them, especially as you said, as a skeptic going, yeah, that all sounds great, but how does that work out? How would that actually play out?
Yeah.
Show me. What was it like to sit and listen to them share?
So for me, again, I really am skeptical of a lot of things, and so I need evidence that it works. So it was cool, first of all, to see that it does work. I think, though, part of it was just realizing how long it took. Initially, they were hesitant to say that their first meeting was tense. And the more we asked them questions, it came out, it was incredibly tense, where they were in each other's faces and saying, this is how I feel when I'm around people like you. This is, and so it was just very, very tense. But they stuck with it. And so I think it shows it's not a one-time thing. It's got to be a long-term relationship. And as they got to know each other better, and I think Chief King said it, he said, as we began to understand each other's backgrounds, then we go, okay, then that's why they act the way they do. That's how they respond, why they respond the way they do. And so it was just real fascinating to watch. It was almost like a little study of what life is like for all of us. And if we just step back and do those same kind of things, and we can't change the world, but it's changing York in their efforts that way. Other communities are coming in now and watching them, talking about and learning from them.
Right.
And so it does start to mushroom and go out, but it starts with just you and me doing that. So.
Yeah, and there's no shortage. I mean, for just us listening to this, it is not like it's the easiest thing to go, okay, in all my discomfort and my familiarity, I'm going to step over this line. But Jesus didn't wait for us. He steps over and comes to us. And so he's now calling us, I feel like, really making a strong argument. Get in the game, and this is how you do it. It may be uncomfortable. Not Chief King, but Pastor Bill talked about, I don't know how this is going to go. What are they going to say? How is this going to go? And now they talk about one another as friends, as people they would not want to be running the community without, because of their need for one another. The last thing I want to just camp on with that was he talked about it took humility. Pastor Bill said it took humility. And we know Paul talks about humility means thinking of others first and putting them before yourself. How detrimental and how dangerous is assumption and suspicion, because that's what he said, assuming or suspecting what their thoughts were or what they were going to do. How dangerous is assumption and suspicion for us when we're trying to make a change?
And we tend to think the worst. And so unless we have something to counteract that, unless we have evidence that thinking the worst isn't true, then we're in trouble. And through all of this process, Dave, I connected with a pastor. So I was trying to figure out, okay, how do I develop relationships with people different than me? And so I reached out to a pastor in Washington, D.C. area. His name is John. And it was real fascinating where we have developed a relationship now where we've interacted enough where we can talk honestly with each other. But after about the third time we talked, I'd gone online and just done a lot of research about him, his family, listened to his messages, and so told him some of the things that I'd seen in a very positive way. And in the midst of that conversation, he actually stopped and he broke down. He said, "You know what?" He said, "I've been around lots and lots of white pastors before and white people before." He said, "I even joined a denomination that's primarily white just so that I would be forced to be around whites." He said, "I've never had anybody actually take the time to research, find out about me, and show interest in me the way you have." And I didn't do a ton. It was just a couple of hours worth of work ahead of time. He said, "That's never happened to me before." And he's 60 years old or more. And it's almost heartbreaking to think, okay, we're in the same line of work. We both have large churches that we're a part of. And yet here's somebody saying nobody's ever taken the time, nobody of a different group has taken the time to just really get to know me and understand me. And so I would say, just don't be afraid as you reach out. Again, if I was going to try to somehow change him and say somehow I'm going to make him think like me, then you ought to be afraid. But if I'm going just to learn, and that's all I did, I said, "Man, John, I'm reaching out to you, say, help me understand what you're seeing, what you're feeling as you're going through this." And I think that's what all of us can do, that with somebody.
I want to say how grateful I am. I was thinking about it as I was listening through you share in this teaching, is that we're repeating some scripture from weeks before, but I wonder, why are we repeating? And I thought through, we're repeating because what else is repeating is not helping throughout my week. I need this repeating on what Jesus has to say, what God's trying to share with us, so that we in our group, so that we as group leaders can be washing our minds with truth and reminding ourselves of, man, Jesus is walking in a very different way, an uncommon ground. So thank you for spending time in week 3 with us.
Hey, Dave, one other thing I'll say real quick. One of the challenges may be, okay, how do I find somebody that's not in my in-group, especially if I'm thinking race, because we're in a very, very white community. And there are so many different ways that we can reach out to people in our out-groups. It could be just socioeconomic differences. It could be political difference. There's all kinds of ways that we can begin to practice this and love other people that are different than us. So don't limit it to just a race. If you can with race, that's wonderful. But man, whatever way you can.
In groups, we hope you talk about it. We hope you engage in it. And really, it's week 3. We hope you actually take action and do something with it. Thanks for joining us for week 3 of Uncommon Ground.